And I am here joined by Mr. Ian Howe, the CEO of Skybound Games. Welcome to the stage.
Thank you.
So we are here today to have a little chat about Telltale's The Walking Dead, wrapping up a fan favorite. So, Ian, we got a chance. I think we met at GamesBeat Summit last year. Up in Mill Valley?
I can't remember.
It was just such a great time. It was a whirlwind.
Yeah,
Blacked out.
Yes, that's normally the case.
So when we're talking about The Walking Dead, clearly this is a franchise that has spanned many different types of media. Do you like that word, transmedia?
I'd never really thought about it. Probably not. No. Cross-media, maybe? I don't know. It's all the same thing.
So what does that mean for you guys at Skybound, working with an interactive format of storytelling that Telltale really started and then passed the baton to you at?
I think Skybound as a whole is the whole reason for being is telling stories. It's Robert Kirkman's company, and it was born out of really his work. So I think we're very familiar with telling stories, and the Telltale game was always a collaboration between the creative minds there and our editorial team. So the editorial of the game has always been kind of put together between the two companies. But obviously with the demise of Telltale, we did then pick up the baton right at the very end of season 4, so kind of 7 or 8 years into an incredibly successful season, which came with a huge responsibility.
Let's talk about some of the challenges that you guys face, because clearly there was a lot of staff that were still like midstream working on the game, and you guys, you know, it sounded like you went through a lot of effort to make sure to try to retain as many of those original creators as possible. Can you talk a little bit about the challenges that you guys went through, making sure that process actually happened?
So I think the first thing once we heard the news and we determined that we were going to do whatever we could to rescue the game, I think the first decision was who can finish this game from a practical standpoint, from a moral standpoint, if it ever had to come to that. And we only ever felt that the original team would be the right people to finish the game. We didn't feel it was practical to take it to another team for many reasons, and we didn't feel that would have been the right thing to do either. So the first challenge was figuring out whether we could actually make it happen from many different factors, but then whether that team really wanted to come back. I mean, they'd been through a tough situation where they were let go with no notice, and so we didn't take it for granted that team would come back just because we asked. So that was an interesting process, and I actually flew up to the Bay Area and met with the team. We did a bit of a town hall at a bar in San Rafael, and I just laid out what we were trying to do. I was just very straightforward and honest with people and said, here's what we're trying to do. We don't know whether it's going to work. If we can make it happen, are you guys in? And almost without exception, the team was like, yeah, we want to finish the story. It's too important not to. So I think from the outset, everybody was trying to do the same thing, and that helped enormously.
Just some background for people maybe watching on stream or here at GamesBeat Summit. You guys are in the 4th season of Telltale's The Walking Dead, and this will be the final season.
It is, yeah. So the final episode launched on March the 26th. So we were able to, I think the Telltale closure happened in September, and the original release date for episode 4 was, I believe, was mid-January. And we were out of action in terms of no development going on for 2 months, and we were able to release just over 2 months late. So and this is incredible credit to the development team, we lost almost no time, and anyone who's worked in any development knows that once you shut things down, kind of starting them up again is pretty challenging. But we lost almost no time in actual production, and the game landed to a fantastic critical reception. So hopefully we did something good.
Well, I'm sure you absolutely did. I haven't caught up on my episodes yet. Don't judge me, okay? I'm saving it all to binge at one time.
Okay.
So we were talking a little bit before we came on stage here today about how Skybound Games is really just getting into the game making process. Obviously, Skybound as a company overall has been in other forms of media over several years. But what was it like for you guys transitioning into launching a title just when you were starting your game development division?
Yeah, that was an interesting process. Skybound Games at that point was 5 people, me plus 4 others, and it landed on us, I think, way before we were ready. So that was a bit of a challenge. Thankfully, it's a very experienced team. The 5 of us have kind of been through this and done it before. So we were able to pull together, bring in a few more people, call in some favors, and again, we were able to put the deals together that needed to be done. We tapped into a lot of the resources of Skybound as a parent company, and everybody at Skybound was incredibly helpful and supportive. And I think the reason behind that is everybody was trying to do the right thing. There was no real conflict of interest anywhere because we were all just trying to do the right thing, which was get the team back to work and finish what has been a story that's become incredibly important to gamers. I mean, from season 1, which was, I think, such a landmark product, to follow Clementine's journey from this kind of 8-year-old lost little girl in this incredible scenario, and then to follow her journey all the way through to the end of season 4, I think she's become incredibly iconic, particularly to the audience that plays this type of game, this type of adventure game, and I think it just goes to show the power of great storytelling.
Oh, absolutely. It's really fascinating looking at what season 1 of Telltale's The Walking Dead did for modern interactive storytelling. I mean, clearly interactive storytelling has been around for quite some time. I mean, I loved my Choose Your Own Adventure books back in the day. We're even seeing other media giants in the space like Netflix exploring what interactive storytelling means for the type of media that they produce. But I mean, when it comes to video games, Telltale really, kind of made their mark in the interactive medium. So where are you guys at as Skybound Games to kind of bring that even further into the future? Are you guys looking at how to advance the medium?
Absolutely, always. I think, we look at what Telltale did, and they certainly established a benchmark. And they established a production process of being able to tell stories with true agency and true choice for the player at certain times. But I think anybody who's made any kind of branching narrative game realizes how quickly it becomes problematic. But the more paths you open up, the more production you open up, and the more chances you have of building things that players are never going to see or are going to utilize in very small amounts. So it quickly becomes very challenging from an economic standpoint to make those games. And I think what Telltale were able to do was constrain that to some degree and keep it within a tight enough parameter that they could make the games both economical, but also that gave the player that feeling of real choice and agency. I think the next step there is to see how development pipelines can be developed now that allow for those production paths to be really made more efficient and to bring the cost of production for those assets down significantly. I think it's really interesting what Netflix did with Bandersnatch. I think anybody from the gaming space will look at it and it's very easy to say it's a very simplistic approach. But I actually really admire the attempt at what they did. And I actually think for a first stab at it, it was a pretty good attempt, because having been even involved in this project for a small amount of time, I realize how problematic multiple choices and multiple endings and multiple pathways can be in a development process.
It certainly sounds easy, but then you get into the thick of it and you're like, oh boy, was not prepared for this. I think it's something that gamers maybe don't think about. I certainly didn't stop to think about the cost of the content that I'm never going to see. It's a really interesting perspective, because I think part of the selling point for products like this are replayability. And continually now, the value of the dollar needs to stretch further and further, and so gamers are looking for something that they can play over and over again. But
absolutely. Did
you guys find that people were going back and making different choices in these titles?
Yeah, there's definitely our audience has been a really I think, a really important part of this process, because at the outset, when Telltale shut down, we adopted the community as well as the game. And that was actually probably, in some ways, a bigger responsibility. This is a community that's grown up with this game, and it's actually quite a young audience, surprisingly, for some of the themes in the game. It's a relatively young audience. So particularly on Reddit, there's a very active community there, and their expectations were up here. And as they should be, they've been delivered, high quality content from Telltale over the years. So living up to that was difficult, but also actually making sure that that we were able to engage that community with some form of continuity from what they expected. And I think we just took the approach of kind of almost kill them with kindness, and just go out there and be completely open, be completely transparent. And it's the first time I've really put myself out there on social media with a project, which is an interesting experience.
I can only imagine. Oh, wait, I can.
Yes, I can only imagine. It's an interesting thing, and I think you have to go into that almost knowing what you're getting into. So
Did you regret your decision?
No, not at all, because actually the words of encouragement from the community actually helped enormously. When you're sat there at midnight looking over one of 67 contracts, and you think, yeah, can somebody else do this? It actually helped. It genuinely helped when you know that there's a community out there who are just really dying to see how Clementine's journey ended.
It's really encouraging to hear that the community rallied around you guys, because clearly the sentiment last fall was, really negative and really all over the place. People being hurt, being upset, being confused. What's happening with the end of this series? Yeah. We really wanted to see the conclusion of this character, and so it's inspiring for me to hear that the community did the right thing, because so many times you hear the other side of those stories.
It was surprisingly untoxic, actually, and there is always going to be an element of there's always going to be part of the audience. You cannot the adage you can't please all the people all the time, I think is true with any product of this nature, particularly when there's a strong narrative, it engenders strong opinions. So I think we realized going into the final episode and bringing that story to a conclusion that we weren't going to please everybody. And I think once you accept that, that's quite liberating, because if you go into it trying to please everybody, you're only going to fail. So the day we launched, I kind of resigned myself to the fact that 50% of the people were probably going to hate our choices. And actually, it turned out that only 20% weren't very happy, and 80% were. And so I think we'll take that.
Hey, that's pretty good.
Yeah, if you'd asked me beforehand, I would have accepted that. So and commercially, it's actually performed really, really well. We've found that a lot of people have come back. Maybe people who lapsed during season 2 or 3 have actually come back to it, and a lot of people have contacted us and said, we just want to support you guys. It's clear you're trying to do the right thing, and that was quite surprising. I didn't think people would be paying that much attention, but they clearly are. And so messages like that were really gratifying.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. And you guys recently launched a bunch of retail sets for the whole game.
We did, actually. Last week we announced the definitive edition. We had 3 editions that we put on pre-order through Skybound Games. And they have been incredibly received. We had 1 edition that sold out in an hour. And again, a lot of the comments were, can't afford this, but going to support Skybound. I don't know how I feel about that. Good, I think. But yeah, there's definitely been a lot of goodwill because of what we've done. I think ultimately, though, the real credit has to go to the development team. They were the ones who actually sacrificed most. There was people on that team who had other job offers on the table that were long-term offers. The offer we could make them was only a short-term contract to come finish the game, yet they chose to come and do that. And I think that is, that as much as anything is testament to the power of the story, and they just wanted to finish it. And so every person who came back to work on that game from the development side was a previous Telltale employee. So it was all from, and 95% was from the original Walking Dead team. So that was good that we were able to put that together.
That is really fantastic to hear. And I'm sure it absolutely shows within the reception from the community and the finished product as well. But I did want to use the last few minutes of our time here to talk about what you guys are doing next. Because obviously, you know, Telltale started this series and you guys finish it, but this is just the beginning for Skybound Games. You guys have a bunch of other projects in the works.
We do. So we're a few more than 5 people now, a year down, or 6-8 months down the line. So we're building a new publisher. Skybound has an enormous catalogue of intellectual property. There's, between Robert's creations and other creators that we work with, we have about 100 different IPs that we work with.
Just a few. Just
a few. So I think Skybound is one of the largest privately held IP libraries in North America. So we have this rich collection of universes and characters from which to draw. That said, we're not just going to focus on those IPs. One of the things that we want to do at Skybound is we want to create IPs in many forms of media, whether that be a comic, a novel, a TV show, an animated series, a game, you name it. We're happy to create IP wherever. And then if it's appropriate and if it makes sense, and if, more importantly, if we get really excited about an opportunity of taking an IP from one medium to another, that's when we'll start to consider it. There's there's never a conversation about, we need a video game based around this IP. It just doesn't work like that. It really comes more organically from the individual teams who work in their individual businesses. And then we can draw upon this IP library and then collaborate if necessary. So I think the freedom of that process ensures that the best content gets made, and it's content that people hopefully get really excited about. So we will be publishing a lot of content that is based on Skybound IP, but also a lot of original content as well. Don't know what that split's going to look like, but maybe 70-30 in favor of original IP. But it's really got to make sense for us to take a product across media, to different forms of media, and only if we can find a concept that really, really fits within that medium.
So does that mean that you're not going to be sticking with the style of narrative video game development that you finished Telltale's The Walking Dead in? Are you guys exploring other kinds of genres, bigger things in scope, maybe smaller things in scope?
We have some interesting things in the works in the narrative sector that we're not ready to talk about publicly yet, but we have been working on something for...
I was going to get the scoop in.
I'm sorry, yeah. I have colleagues that will kill me. One of them has already thrown daggers at me from the back of the room. So we do have some stuff in the works there that I think is super interesting as a different take on how we tell stories to that audience. So yeah, I think long term there will be a lot of stuff we do in that space. I do think we want to evolve the genre a little bit. And we know there's a lot of developers out there at the moment who are trying to evolve the genre a lot, and there's a lot of investment going into, again, Netflix is a great example of where there's a lot of investment going into that medium. But in terms of genre, Skybound's we're going to be publishing everything. You name it, we'll be publishing it. We're genre agnostic, but narrative will always be at the heart of what we do.
All right, one personal question before we get off the stage. When we were chatting in preparation for GamesBeat Summit, one of the really interesting things that we were talking about is the massive amounts of data that you got from Telltale when you took over the process and took over the development of The Walking Dead, really taking all of their assets and all of their files, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
Are we ever going to see that data? The choices that people made along the way? How many people, kill off certain characters? Who lived? Who died? What they did with their Clementine?
There are comparable stats in the game for some of the choices you make, but I've never thought about the option to go back and analyze all those choices. But I
find it fascinating. I'm sure somebody else out there does
I'm now
too.
inspired to do that. So I'm a data junkie. So you've just ruined my weekend. Go and look through the data room that we have.
Oh, you're gonna love it just as much as you know you will.
Yeah, that's more spreadsheets for me to pour over. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah.
Well, Ian, thank you so much for chatting with me today, and thank you to everybody watching. And enjoy the rest of your time here at GamesBeat Summit.
Likewise. Thank you.